está indignada. Ya hemos visto que están jugando con las habichuelas de muchos trabajadores. Ya están privatizando parte de servicios esenciales, como es la autoridad. La autoridad tiene el 70% de los embalses. O sea, que van a privatizar, como están diciendo, también parte de la autoridad de acueducto. Tienen la red más poderosa del Caribe, que es Prepanet, que es nuestra. Van a seguir privatizando nuestros parques. Van a seguir privatizando las playas. Van a privatizar hasta tu casa si lo dejan. Mira, yo creo que ella mismo pone a Fortaleza en Airbnb o lo hace un hotel. O sea que ya estamos hartos, estamos cansados de este gobierno intransigente y de tanta sanganería que tienen entre coro y carne, porque ahora mismo todo el mundo, en el mundo entero, dirán, vamos a Puerto Rico, que ahí que es donde hacen los contratos más estúpidos de la vida, porque ante el ojo público, ante la mirada mundial, nosotros estamos así, porque mira, sacamos a ese gobernador y lo eligen para que entonces vaya a cabildear por la estadidad también. O sea que, ¿dónde está la dignidad de este pueblo? Aquí hace falta voluntad. Y nosotros estamos directos para trabajar por este pueblo, por este país, por levantarnos y por las futuras generaciones. Así que estamos aquí, lucha sí.
Y otra cosa es que aquí estamos la clase trabajadora, pero esto no es una lucha solamente de los sindicatos y de la clase trabajadora, esto es una lucha del país entero. Por primera vez hasta la clase religiosa de este país se unió y tuvo una marcha. Aquí todo vecino de pueblo está molesto con este contrato. Así que simplemente nosotros sabemos que ese apoyo de pueblo lo vamos a tener.
¿Por qué esperaron hasta el 1 de junio para hacer esta organización si esto no lo realizaron semanas antes de todo lo que venía?
Bueno, Gualberto Rolón, secretario de Salud y Seguridad de Lutiel. Está preguntando que si cómo se traduce esto en la calle, lo que los invito a que vayan a Palo Seco ahora mismo, que estamos allí desde las 5 de la mañana, los invito a que vayan a Utuado, los invito a que vayan a Mayagüez, los invito a que vayan a Ponce, y esto es solamente el comienzo, esto comenzó el 1 de mayo. Estamos ante un gobernador que es el jefe de una empresa criminal, que es LUMA Energy, que es el jefe de la Junta de Control, que trabaja para la Junta de Control Fiscal, que es el jefe de las APP, que todos son una empresa criminal, y han venido aquí a fastidiarle la vida al pueblo de Puerto Rico, que este contrato lo que va es a empobrecer más a la clase pobre de Puerto Rico, y nosotros estamos en la calle, junto con los compañeros del movimiento obrero, junto con las comunidades adyacentes, con los puertos, la gente de la religión, estudiantes, todas las comunidades se han unido a esta lucha, porque esto es una lucha de pueblo. Así que los invito, si esto ¿qué se traduce esto en la calle? Pues vayan, los invito, estamos en Palo Seco desde las 5 de la mañana, estamos en Ponce, estamos en Utuado, y esta es la primera fase, la segunda fase va a seguir mañana, y esto se va a seguir incrementando, porque no vamos a descansar hasta sacar a este gobernador de Puerto Rico y sacar a LUMA Energy. Por eso nosotros en la Ruta de la Verdad también nos dimos a la tarea del proceso, que es bien importante, que es un proceso educativo, ir pueblo por pueblo, y todavía no hemos terminado, para llevarle al pueblo lo que significa este contrato en arroz y habichuela, y aquí está el resultado, aquí está un pueblo unido completo para terminar con ese contrato una vez y por todas.
Ustedes están hablando de emular el verano del 2019 con un verano del 2021. ¿Qué tipo de actividades podemos esperar como parte de eso?
Bueno, sea Ángel Rodríguez, presidente de la APU, primero que todo, la compañera tiene razón, las que sean necesarias. Segundo, cuando nos preguntan por qué esperamos hasta este momento, no estamos esperando. Por mucho tiempo se habla de dialogar y fuimos donde el gobernador, de dialogar y fuimos a la legislatura, de dialogar y hablamos públicamente con todos los sectores. El tiempo de dialogar, ellos lo tuvieron en sus manos y querían mollero, pues tienen mollero. Pues para que puedan dialogar ahora, van a tener que hacerlo en la calle junto al movimiento obrero de los sectores sociales. ¿Qué tipo de actividad? De paralizaciones, piquetes, todo tipo de actividad, porque lo que sea necesario, incluyendo la desobediencia civil, para paralizar un contrato que es malo para Puerto Rico y que es parte de los procesos que lleva la Junta de Control Fiscal.
Yo, antes de continuar, también quiero añadir algo. Esto de LUMA no es lo único. Además de la peligrosidad de LUMA, vienen tras nuestro centro docente más importante, la Universidad de Puerto Rico. Nos quieren dejar sin educación pública y acceso a la clase trabajadora y las clases menos pudientes. Nosotros tenemos que estar el próximo 11 de junio en una de las actividades marchando por nuestra universidad. Todos pasamos por ahí y hay que defenderla.
nombre es Lisbeth Mercado, presidenta de la Unión de Empleados de la Corporación del Fondo del Seguro del Estado. Siguiendo la línea de los compañeros, la lucha es cuando nosotros digamos, no es cuando diga el gobernador. Ya el diálogo se acabó, así que ya no hay paños tibios. Y yo le recomiendo al gobernador y le digo a él, ya se acabó el estar diciendo tanta mentira y el cambia. Le solicito que nos deje expresarnos en la calle como tiene que ser, que así lo dice la Constitución de Puerto Rico, y deje de estar amenazándonos a nosotros con los policías y los de la fuerza de choque, porque nosotros somos trabajadores de Puerto Rico, no somos criminales. Obreros unidos, obreros unidos, desde adentro y desde afuera, desde adentro y desde afuera. Lucha así, se lucha así.
Oiga, me llama la atención una cosa, de que todo esto surge como una reivindicación inmediata, que es el asunto con LUMA, pero ya están pasando a una situación mucho más adentro, como una reivindicación más inmediata, más a lo lejos, más a largo plazo, que es sacar al gobernador de
Eso, sí, eso es así, es así. Y eso es así, ¿por qué? Porque quien dirige el saqueo por parte de la empresa privada, quien es la persona que se ha prestado traicionando el voto que le dieron el 30 y pico % de la gente que le dio el voto al gobernador, es el gobernador, el principal exponente del sector privado que le quiere comer, que se quiere robar, que se quiere llevar lo poco que le queda al pueblo de Puerto Rico. Y en esa dirección queremos decirle al gobernador de Puerto Rico, le queremos decir a la policía de Puerto Rico, le queremos decir a la Guardia Nacional de Puerto Rico, que van a tener que buscar muchas esposas, van a tener que buscar muchas cadenas, porque ya ustedes tocaron a 3 compañeros en Ponce y se los llevaron. Pues vayan preparando las cárceles, porque las vamos a llenar de trabajadores y trabajadoras, porque nosotros no vamos a echar hacia atrás y vamos a defender como tengamos que defender el patrimonio y defender todo lo que le corresponde al pueblo de Puerto Rico. El verano del 2021 acaba de empezar hoy. Señor gobernador, la bola está en su cancha.
Mira, hermano, nosotros tenemos un gran respeto por ti, porque saliste perseguido de tu país y aquí te dimos albergue y eres un buen periodista. Pero te quiero recordar a ti y a la demás prensa aquí que Cristo sacó a los mercaderes del templo con el látigo en la mano, y nosotros vamos a sacar a LUMA con nuestra voluntad, nuestra fuerza y nuestra lucha.
¿Cuál es la reacción que esperan del gobernador luego de escuchar esto, verdad? Que se va a enterar de todo lo que han dicho. ¿Qué reacción ustedes esperan de él?
Yo esperaría que el gobernador pusiera oído en tierra y cancelara el contrato inmediatamente. ¿Cuánto tiempo le vamos a dar? El tiempo se le acabó. Nos vamos a la calle desde hoy. Desde hoy. El gobernador tiene que reaccionar ahora. Yo esperaría que él haga caso de lo que es el pueblo de Puerto Rico, organizado en sindicatos, en comunidades, en iglesias, en todos los sectores sociales, y desista de ese contrato que no solamente es injusto, es malo. Como contrato es una porquería y el reflejo de la porquería que lo firmó.
That we're going to work through in the following months. So we're in a good place today with resourcing.
A todos los lugares de Puerto Rico.
Last week you said
A
you
donde
had
sea
350 line workers from PREPA, and that you would need some other resources from the states to be able to do the job the first few days. Is that still true?
Yes, we've brought in some additional supervision and some additional crews from our parent companies in these early days to
Okay.
ensure that we're managing health and safety and that we're getting our teams oriented correctly.
You also said that's temporary. So when I say short of staff, I mean that. How
Okay.
many line workers officially working for you from Puerto Rico will you need to be,
300
fully?
350.
That's all you need?
That will be sufficient. Thank you. Yes.
Hold on.
And I have another question. After working with the backlog, the outages, what's the first order of business after that?
Well, yeah, I think that's, yeah, thank you. I think that's a great question. Number one is to stay on top of outages, but there is a significant amount of, as you know, of damaged infrastructure. And so we have some work planned on large transmission. We have the worst performing feeder program. So you may recall we spoke about a few months ago how we've analyzed worst performing feeders across Puerto Rico, meaning the highest outage rate or the worst customer outage rate. And so we're going to tackle those worst performing feeders. We're also going to move into our street lighting program and continue to advance lighting replacements in all corners of Puerto Rico.
Danica.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Thanks for hosting this roundtable. You had mentioned that there was a significant number of outages that began at 9 a.m. What do you attribute those to, and how many clients are currently without power?
Yeah, sorry. Perhaps you misunderstood, but there's a significant amount of outages that have occurred over the last couple of weeks, I guess, quite a deficit of outages. And so we're beginning to address those outages. And my comment about 9 a.m. was when we were having our first crews and trucks rolling to begin to address those outages. There is some question of the reliability of the outage data right now, and our teams are working through that. But it looks like it's approaching almost 19,000 customers.
Thank you.
Joan Isabel.
Good morning. I do have a couple of questions regarding the Bureau's resolutions. The first has to do with a conditional improvement of the operating principles. I wonder how do you plan to tackle those findings? Basically, the board or the Bureau is saying that your proposal were quite weak. I wonder if you defer or not. And also, I would like to get some color in terms of how the decision of the Bureau, in terms of your budget, could affect your operations. I believe that it's probably more than $100 million less than you requested.
No, I don't think it is actually, but we were pleased to receive the decisions late last night. I think the decisions on our initial review were sufficient to allow us to move into commencement, into operation, and that was our largest priority, to be honest. Is for all the reasons we've spoken about before, it was very important for us to get started, and the decisions will take some review, and obviously we need to work through them. But I think in all cases, as I mentioned, they were sufficient to allow us to move into service commencement. We anticipate, we're going to have a 15-year plus relationship with the Puerto Rican Energy Bureau and the commissioners, and so we have constructive relationships no matter where we do business with the regulator, and I think we're on a good path to forming the same here. That doesn't mean there isn't at times, the push and the pull of the utility versus the regulator, but we're respectful of the regulator's role. And indeed, as you point out, in all of the resolutions that they provided or the orders that they provided late yesterday, there's additional follow-up, there's additional requests, there's additional submissions of data, and we anticipated much of that. So, we're going to continue to work through that, and I think your characterization of the system operating principles. We don't share the view that in the way that you perhaps characterize them, but we are absolutely committed to providing the detail that the Bureau is looking for. And as I say, I think what's most important is we actually start in our role and start to make improvements.
Manuel Guillama, Metro.
Good morning. Will LUMA ask for any sort of reconsideration on the PREP's decision to not grant a full liability waiver on potential damages caused by LUMA's employees or contractors? I mean, is the PREP incurring in any sort of breach of contract, considering that the O&M agreement stipulated the full waiver?
I mean, we would have been. We were a bit disappointed, I guess I would characterize it, that and we are still of the view that a broad waiver is better for customers. But as I said earlier, for us it was more important to move forward and start to make a meaningful difference and show customers why we're here. And we will review all of the orders last night in detail. And understand how we move forward with them. But as I say, we were of the view they were sufficient to get started and move ourselves into service commencement.
I have another couple of questions. First, how will LUMA Energy contribute to transforming the energy system into a renewable energy based? The PREP, for example, concluded in one of the resolutions, particularly in the budget resolution, that LUMA hasn't submitted any specific programs outlined in that regard, as far as making the grid more renewable energy based.
Yeah, I mean, again, I would say that's a perspective we don't share. We think the foundational elements of improving base reliability on the grid, removing system constraints from the grid, improving kind of some very simple documentation and beginning to carry out proper asset management are all extraordinarily fundamental issues in order for us to get Puerto Rico's grid to a place where it can reliably support significant levels of renewable energy. And so we see ourselves as an enabler of that process. I would also say, in addition, we are going to tackle the large backlog of renewable interconnections in the queue for analysis. We think that, I think it's important to work to clear out that queue, even though there are some real challenges with the actual documentation and the understanding of the state of some of the detailed infrastructure. But we're going to work through that in the coming months to bring that queue down, and to really show people by our actions that we are serious about supporting and promoting renewables.
Finally, you just said that about 9,000 clients are out of service as of this moment. What's the number that we should be expecting on an ordinary basis in terms of clients being out of service? For the last few days, we've had up to 40,000 people out of service. So what should be the expectation now that LUMA is in charge of the system?
Yeah, I think what I mentioned is almost 19,000, and unfortunately, and as I mentioned on Sunday, we don't consider that normal at all. So we're going to work very, very hard to get that number down, and then the function or the exact number that are out at any one time is a function of the state of the infrastructure. So I don't want to try and provide or guess at an approximate number. I think the number is fundamentally much too large, and I think it's not only the number that I would point to that are without service, but what we have to get to is a place where the restoration times are much more reduced. Some of the frustrations I've heard in the last short while are that a number of these customers have been without electricity for extended periods of time.
Luis Guardiola.
Good morning to everyone. There's a question still lingering, waiting for an answer, and that is if you are inclined to ask for the Bureau to reconsider its decision about the liability waiver. Are you or are you not?
Well, as I mentioned, we received it 12 hours ago. So, and our focus last night was actually moving into commencement. So we'll consider that in due course, I think, Luis.
But you don't have any inclination to do so if it was so important for you? You still have that mechanism, right, to ask for reconsideration, or not?
Yes, that mechanism still exists.
Okay. In the alternative, will you ask for the rate to be increased, as you said, that then the rate has to be increased? In order to do with the...
No, we will not.
You will not now nor ever? Regarding that point?
Never's a long time. No, we will not ask for rate increase.
Before the 3 years, before the first 3 years.
No, we will not be asking for a rate increase as a result of the liability waiver that was less than what we had requested.
My other question is about the monies that LUMA receives. Do you regard those monies as public funds or not?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, before you came, the funds that that PREPA administered were considered public funds for everyone in Puerto Rico. So they were subject to the scrutiny of everyone because they were considered public funds. Do you think that those are public funds?
I mean, what I can tell you is the revenues come from Puerto Rico electricity customers. I think that's pretty clear. And we're subject to the relevant laws and regulations, so associated with operating electricity company here in Puerto Rico.
Okay, so how do you justify the activities that were held today at Ponce and San Juan? How do you explain to the people, to the clients then, the use of their monies to to do those activities, to perform those activities with employees this morning in hotels and the Centro de Convenciones?
Those are part of safely putting employees to work, and it's not more complicated than that.
So those venues were the cheapest and better alternatives to do that?
Indeed, considering the security situation that has been created by detractors and people that continue to break the law, that is the view, yes.
Who do you mean, break the law?
I think you know as well as I do.
No, when you know what do you think?
I know what I read in the newspaper this morning.
You mean Utier and on the unions?
Yeah, I mean the very people that have been causing the violence and causing disruption and have left customers without electricity for extended periods of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Michelle Kasky.
Good morning. Thank you for this this presser and this roundtable. You had mentioned earlier that you have brought in some workforce from the mainland. You mentioned, I think, additional supervision staff and additional crews. Could you give me the number of the number of additional people that have been brought in, and if they're temporary, how long that they would need to work on the system in order for Luma to get like fully up and running? I mean, how long would they need to work on the island before they're not needed anymore?
No, I understand. So
Yeah.
I would imagine, or we would imagine that they will be here for the next 3 to 4 weeks, perhaps. We think by the end of the month, all things being well, that we'll skinny those people up. And we brought in, I think, in the neighborhood of about 60 people.
Okay. And you mentioned the almost 19,000 customers without power today. That is because of a backlog of outages that have happened. You said, I believe you said over the past couple of weeks. How much longer do you think those 19,000 will be without power?
Yeah, because we are a little suspect of the data, we're working through that, and I think we'll have a better understanding in the next 2 or 3 days as to the magnitude of and the underlying cause of those outages, and then what we think the restoration time will be. So we'll look to continually update you on what we see as estimated restoration times for that backlog.
And my last question is, what is your biggest concern right now?
I frankly am very excited on behalf of the entire LUMA team to get started. So I don't have a largest concern at this moment. I think we've got teams in place, we've got people doing work, and I think it's important that we just take this kind of step by step, hour by hour, and really tackle those outages. That's like I can't say it enough. That's got to be our number one priority.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Oscar Serrano. Oscar, no te escuchamos.
Good morning.
Ahora.
Good morning, Mr. Stensby, and thank you for holding this roundtable. They say in business that past performance is the surest indicator of future outcome, right? And in your main invoice for the transition period, you show that you're carrying a close to 20% overrun on the budget. Should we expect you then to not be able to get the operation under budgetary constraints?
Well, I think if you take your example, actually, and I'll talk to the budget piece in a second, but I just want to remind people and make it very clear that when we were awarded the contract on the 22nd of June of last year, we said that we would take 11 months to move through the front end transition period. And, as we moved into service commencement last night, we are exactly on schedule, or in fact, a little bit ahead schedule. So in spite of all of the challenges that, that we would have faced in the front end transition, we were very, very pleased to push hard and move into service commencement. And I mean, that does speak to the May costs that you indicate, we certainly made some decisions in May to accelerate. We felt that it was extra important. We had seen some challenges, and so we did accelerate in May in order that we could get started here in June. So I actually think our performance was very, very good, and yeah, our focus is now making a difference for customers.
But is it fair to say that your ability to meet that goal took or entails a 20% budget overrun that everyone in Puerto Rico will have to pay because those are public funds?
I would not characterize it that way. No, I think the original cost structure that was put in the bid and was selected by the P3A was always intended to be a very broad cost estimate, and the fact that we were able to hold schedule, or in fact be even slightly ahead of schedule, is a credit to not only the LUMA team, but the P3A and all of the other agencies that we worked with.
Okay, and one last question regarding a kind of follow-up to what my colleague Luis Guardiola was asking. The electric utility company here in Puerto Rico, but I think it's fair to say pretty much everywhere else, is expected to conduct itself with the utmost transparency because they provide an essential service. If the company somehow fails or makes a mistake or something, everyone pays for that with a bad service or with an outage. So I'm wondering if you plan to be more transparent than you have been during the transition in terms of things like board meetings or board decisions or salaries or contracts that you may choose to give out as part of your job, even to provide regular accountability on some of the initiatives you mentioned today, like the public street lamps and all that. I mean, will we have transparency on that? Real transparency?
Yes, you will. Absolutely, you will. And I guess I'd remind you that the parent companies of LUMA are in fact utility operators, right? This is not the first utility for us. We have utility operations in many corners of the world, and we absolutely understand how to work with customers, how to provide customer transparency, and how to provide, frankly, great customer service. That is a priority for us. So in terms of being able to communicate and show our initiatives and show how we are making our way through the plans that we submitted to the PREB is a very important function and feature of what we will be doing. We will have multiple channels in order to show progress on and meaningful progress against the performance metrics that we put into place, against the various programs that we put in for regulatory approval, and as you mentioned, street lighting, for example. So it is very important to us that we're able to communicate to all of our customers, in relatively simple ways that people can understand where the revenues of the power company are going and how they're resulting in reinvestment and how they're resulting in improvement in reliability and all of the other areas that they would expect.
Examples you can point to that you plan to use?
Sorry, I missed the question.
Any examples you can provide of how you plan to do that? How you plan to provide that kind of accountability and transparency? Any concrete examples you might have in your plans?
Well, performance metrics. Performance metrics will need to be reported to the PREB, and we will be reporting them publicly as we march through all of those various performance metrics. But I would say, in addition, all of those initiatives we will be publicly reporting on as we kick off large projects and as we kick off the significant $10+ billion in FEMA funding. Each and every one of those projects will have a public consultation component, and we will continuously provide updates on the progress of those projects.
Thank you.
Gracias, Oscar. Iván Martínez.
Good morning, Mr. Stensby. Good morning. In terms of equipment and materials, LUMA is prepared for dealing with the aftermath of a Category 2 hurricane. Could you further explain how, in case of a higher intensity hurricane this season, LUMA plans to tackle that scenario?
Yes. So, the first aspect of hurricane preparedness is in fact preparedness, right? And having emergency response plans, emergency response procedures, and being able to then carry out damage assessments so that you can understand the level of so that you can understand the level of damage that the system has suffered. Then, similar to other utilities, you have mutual aid agreements in place. You bring in additional contract resources to begin the restoration effort. You bring in additional materials to support that effort. And you bring in temporary generation or temporary materials in order to quickly restore critical customer loads. So, it's about assessing the criticality and having those plans in place, and then working very closely with the other agencies that are in support of restoration activities.
Sure. And regarding the order of the restoration efforts of the power grid, what's the criteria LUMA will follow in case of a natural disaster? How would you decide the order of the restoration efforts? How is that pre-taught in your plans?
So the the place you have to start is you need to get generation facilities back up and running, and of course those are PREPA's facilities broadly, or Ecoelectrica and AES. But so you need to start with generation. You need to get key elements of bulk transmission back, and then what you do is you work through. We have critical load lists that identify the most critical loads across Puerto Rico, and you systematically work through those critical loads in order to restore the system.
Has the local emergency management agency or any local or federal health authority shared information about the electricity-dependent populations or centers with electricity-dependent populations in the island? Has you received any information so far?
Yes, we have. We've been collaborating with those. We also have the existing Lifeline customers that PREPA had registered on their system.
Yeah, could you explain that Lifeline customer information?
Yeah, so we identify customers that have critical needs for electricity in their homes, that may have medical support needs or related needs, and we make sure that we have additional communication sources available in the case of an outage or pending outage, so that we're able to quickly contact those customers and provide as much notice as possible and support them.
Was this a database created by PREPA or by any other or by other emergency management or health authority?
I believe we started from PREPA's database, but I'm not certain.
Thank you.
Elsa.
Good day, Mr. Stensby. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I want to talk about the consumers services offices. Uh, Although in LUMA's website it says some offices are open, some media reports said that Vieques, Culebra offices are closed, and I don't know if you know about the residents of Vieques and Culebra's struggles for their day basis. What is going to happen with these offices and the rest in the list? I believe there's Monacillos in Rio Piedras, there's one in Lares, and I think Cabo Rojo.
Cabo Rojo, I think. So we'll get you an updated schedule of those office openings. They are intended to open. There were some offices in these first few days that, as we were getting ourselves stood up, we'll delay opening for a couple of days. And there were also a couple of offices that for security provisions, we had them closed for a couple of days. But we'll follow back up with our intention to open those facilities.
Okay, so but you are saying that in the case of Vieques and Culebra, they are going to reopen.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
you guarantee that. Okay.
We are not. I just want to be really clear. We're not closing any of the customer service centers.
Okay. So we also learned today that there's a huge line of people, or at least in the morning, outside the San Germán offices. And this was on, I saw it on the UTR's Facebook page. And they say that LUMA's personnel is not capable and doesn't have the knowledge to deal with clients. How do you respond to this?
We did see quite a volume of traffic this morning for sure. Our teams are busy working through it. And I mean, you have our commitment that we will work through it. And, our belief is we will be able to offer the service that people expect very shortly. And for anyone who was found, standing in line or unfortunately having to wait a few moments this morning, we are truly sorry. We put customers first, and we're going to get better.
So regarding what one of my colleagues asked about responding after a major hurricane, you recently said that LUMA can just handle a Category 2 hurricane, and you'll need help from other companies, maybe from the mainland. Do you have a list or know from where are going to come these linemen to help LUMA to deal with the power grid?
Yeah, so we would tap into mutual aid agreements that then in turn tap into a variety of other utilities in the U.S. And really, at any given point in time, it has to do with what their own situation is. That's how mutual aid works. Is we help each other. We in turn have access to additional line worker companies, including Quanta, in terms of being able to supply additional people.
This mutual aid is just help, is a favor, or how much does it cost to the people of Puerto Rico?
Yeah, the way mutual aid works is, if we all sign up to mutual aid agreements, and in the time of need, those that are able to supply people and equipment and resources do so, and they agree to do it at no profit. So line workers or trucks or associated equipment are provided at cost. And the intention is that it works both ways. So certainly LUMA's intention into the future is that one day we too are able to send Puerto Ricans into other utilities in order to support them when they have a time of need. I look forward to being able to getting into true mutual aid arrangements, which means it benefits both parties.
Okay. So, yeah.
And in that case,
Y en ese
the
caso,
utility that was receiving service from LUMA
la compañía de servicios públicos que estaba recibiendo servicios de LUMA le pagará a LUMA sus costos para que los clientes no sean impactados. Bien. Sí, buenos días. Gracias por la conferencia de prensa. Tengo 2 o 3 preguntas, como el resto de mis colegas, y le pido excusas por ser repetitivo, ya que yo me uní a esta conferencia de prensa de manera tardía, pero quería saber si usted me puede dar a mí una reacción sobre las resoluciones emitidas por el Buró de Energías, específicamente. Tal parece que ellos aprobaron el presupuesto que usted pidió en base a lo que yo leí, pero ellos tenían ciertos comentarios con respecto a los principios de operación de sistemas. Yo me pregunto, ¿qué va a hacer usted con respecto a eso específicamente y qué opina usted sobre el presupuesto? Y yo tengo otras preguntas después de esta. Creo que la manera que yo lo dije hace unos minutos es que nos complació recibir las decisiones anoche, nos permitieron entrar a brindar servicios, eso fue muy importante. Las decisiones en sí, como las presentaciones son complejas, vamos a solucionar estas en las próximas días y semanas. Sí, en términos generales, tenemos el presupuesto, eso es bueno. Hay ciertos requisitos de reportes y elementos asociados a estas que hay que darle seguimiento. Los principios de operación de sistemas ya comenzaron, pero tenemos que dar más detalles después, cuando podamos dar el seguimiento a esto. Una vez más, nos permite a nosotros adentrarnos a brindar servicio, ya que era importante. Y por lo tanto, sí, yo creo que como muchas decisiones regulatorias, hay toma y dale, y vamos a trabajar de manera constructiva con los reguladores estas próximas semanas y días. Con respecto al waiver, ¿aprobaron ustedes ya un waiver de responsabilidad civil general? Una de las razones por la cual LUMA pidió este waiver de responsabilidad civil es porque quería ahorrar dinero en seguros y evitar alzas de tasas, pero obviamente el PREP no aprobó la petición de LUMA tal y como se presentó. Así que yo tengo curiosidad en saber si esto nos va a llevar a una alza en las tarifas en el futuro o ese tipo de cosas. Sí, bueno, entonces, sabes, como yo también mencioné anteriormente, aún pensamos que un finiquito, un waiver amplio será lo mejor para los clientes, pero estamos procediendo con el fallo de PREPS. Sabes, el tiempo dirá, supongo, cuán eficaz es este finiquito o waiver para evitar un litigio innecesario. Puedo asegurar que vamos a hacer todo lo posible para poder manejar todo esto, para que los costos se mantengan bajos. Y estoy seguro yo que el PREP también se estará fijando en esto. Si mi última pregunta estaba relacionada con las acciones de la Junta el viernes, ellos aprobaron la resolución creando las subsidiarias de Gridco y GEMCO, y naturalmente LUMA va a estar a cargo de Gridco. La resolución dice que estas subsidiarias son públicas. Mi pregunta es, yo sé que el controlador del Commonwealth del Estado Libre Asociado no va a poder auditar a LUMA, pero sí puede auditar a Gridco, ya que es una entidad pública. En otras palabras, puede auditar quizás el trabajo que ustedes hacen o parte de este trabajo. Así que tengo curiosidad en saber qué piensa LUMA Energy sobre esto y esa auditoría posible por parte del controlador del Estado Libre Asociado, el Commonwealth. Eso es todo. Eso es la pregunta. Bien. Bueno, hay cláusulas de auditoría sustanciales bajo el contrato y, sabes, lo que yo continuaré diciendo es que Luma en sí tiene requisitos de auditoría sustanciales también. Tenemos que presentar estados financieros auditados todos los años. No nos permiten y tampoco nosotros no pasaríamos varios años sin tener estados financieros auditados. Yo creo que hay unas cláusulas muy amplias. Yo sé que hay bajo el contrato cláusulas de auditoría amplias y con muchísimo gusto nosotros cumpliremos con todas esas cláusulas de auditoría y somos una empresa moderna que está haciendo las cosas como se debe hacer y no nos preocupan las auditorías en absoluto. También tenemos una supervisión regulatoria muy importante y el PREP también puede, eh, de hecho, a cabo su propia auditoría como desee. Muchas gracias, Eva. Voy a hacer una pregunta en nombre de Kevin Pincon Priorca. Quiero verificar que todas las condiciones presentes para comenzar se cumplieron. También puede darme o Lumos una actualización sobre el estado de las matrices de desempeño. Quizás la segunda primero. Kevin, yo creo que las mediciones del desempeño aún están haciéndose. No me recuerdo exactamente la fecha tope que tenemos exacta. Septiembre. Yo pensaba en agosto, pero estamos continuando nosotros solucionando ese eh, eh, riguroso horario para estas matrices de desempeño. Creo que sabes que comenzamos primero con prepa y después subsecuentemente LUMA hizo sus presentaciones regulatorias con respecto a las matrices de desempeño. Esto es un tema muy amplio y para nosotros es muy importante, ya que nosotros queremos manejar nuestro propio negocio y reportarle a los clientes usando hechos y datos, y esas mediciones del desempeño nuestro son muy importantes y así lo haremos. Tu pregunta sobre eh, si todas las condiciones fueron cumplidas para poder entrar a brindar servicio, yo diría que nosotros sí hemos comenzado a brindar servicio, así que sí. Hubo un par de asuntos de índole que las partes pasaron por alto, pero ya comenzamos a brindar servicio porque eso es lo más importante para todos nosotros para comenzar. Con el tiempo que tenemos, la primera que levantó la mano fue Selimar. Selimar, ¿tienes una pregunta de seguimiento? Sí, con respecto a el waiver de responsabilidad civil. Tú acabas de decir que no vas a hablar acerca de elevar las tarifas por un par de años. ¿Hay algún otro cambio que necesitas hacer que va o no impactar la cuenta de electricidad? Debido a esta que se negó el waiver de responsabilidad civil. No, yo no creo que en este momento hay algo así. Jones, gracias. Me preguntaba, ¿tenemos alguna información que hay problemas de reportes que se utilizan en la plataforma, en la página cibernética de Lumas? ¿Hay algunos problemas esta mañana allí? No sé, nosotros envíamelos, por favor. Si las personas están teniendo problemas, tenemos que saberlo para poder abordarlos, obviamente, pero yo diría que en general ha sido muy buena. Tuvimos un par de problemas de menor índole de tecnología que pudimos resolver antes de las 7 de la mañana. Obviamente, hay muchas personas y muchas piezas. Y, sabes, yo creo que en términos generales ha sido bastante buena y con el pasar de las horas mejoramos. Otra pregunta rápida. Usted dijo al principio de la conferencia que estaba preocupado y repitió una vez más de aquellos que quebrantan la ley. Pluma ha presentado cargos contra alguien en base a lo que usted piensa sería que han quebrantado la ley. Y en estos momentos Luma no lo ha hecho, pero Luma sí lo hará. Sí, sí y cuando nos encontramos con actos de sabotaje o personas que han entrado ilegalmente en las propiedades nuestras, acciones contra la propiedad que tenemos nosotros la responsabilidad de proteger, definitivamente lo haremos. Eso es todo el tiempo que tenemos hoy día. Muchas gracias a todos por estar acá con nosotros. Luis, Luis, tiempo para una más, por favor. Una pregunta rápida, sí. ¿Planea usted hablar con los diferentes empleados muy técnicos y los line workers de prepa para poder tratar de reclutarlos en los próximos días? ¿Usted va a hacer eso? Si vamos a continuar todo esto, Luis, yo creo que esa es una gran pregunta que has hecho. Yo me siento optimista. Sabes, a pesar de que yo dije anteriormente que tenemos el número adecuado para comenzar ya, sí vamos a ser una compañía en crecimiento. Y si usted se siente apasionado y quiere ser parte de una compañía en crecimiento, queremos que sean parte de nuestro grupo. Me siento optimista que algunas de esas personas que a través de esta transición pensaban que ellos no querían ser parte del humo, una vez que hablen con sus colegas y una vez que ellos comprendan lo que está haciendo el Luma, quizás que tengan más, se sientan más cómodos con unirse al Luma, que por favor vengan acá con nosotros. Hay mucho trabajo que hacer, muchas cosas que hacer. Y si te gusta la electricidad y si te gusta mejorar la vida a otras personas y ayudar a la economía en Puerto Rico, no hay mejor sitio que hacerlo que acá. Bueno, ¿vas a contactarlos o meramente vas a esperar a que ellos hablen con los otros empleados y se sienten cómodos en hacerlo? ¿O vas tú a contactarlos de alguna manera? Bueno, yo creo que vamos a continuar nosotros. Sí, con seguridad, pero dado a que, sabes, yo creo que la fuerza más poderosa en estos momentos es el hecho de que hay colegas que están con nosotros y las oportunidades informales para que la red en Puerto Rico ayude a las personas a entender que el gran sitio de trabajo somos nosotros. Tomaremos una pregunta más de Michelle Kasky y entonces terminaremos con eso, Michelle. Muy bien, muchísimas gracias. Cuando esta mañana, o sindicatos, ¿sabes? Una coalición de otros sindicatos en la isla prometiendo huelgas a través de toda la isla, prometiendo que esto será un verano semejante al 2019 cuando sacaron a Rosselló de Fortaleza. ¿Cuál es su respuesta a esto, su reacción a esta? Bueno, obviamente espero que eso no sea el caso. Y, saben, como dije yo anteriormente, estoy seguro que hablo en nombre de muchas personas. El, el foco acá es que el sistema eléctrico se mejore. Luma es un patrón de calidad. En estos momentos hay más de 2.200 empleados de calidad que trabajan con nosotros y el tiempo que yo he pasado con estos empleados en los últimos días le demuestra cuán entusiasta y cuánta energía cada uno de ellos está aportando en sus labores. ¿Qué le diría usted a estos líderes sindicalistas? ¿Qué le diría usted a estas personas que están prometiendo verano caótico? Yo le preguntaría por qué. ¿Contra qué están luchando ellos? ¿Cómo puedes luchar en contra de mejor servicio al cliente y mejor electricidad? Grandes carreras y gran capacitación y poniendo en primer lugar la seguridad y la salud. ¿Por qué hay que luchar? ¿Cuál es el punto? ¿En contra de qué están ellos? Eso es lo que yo le preguntaría a ellos. Bien, gracias. Muchísimas gracias a todos por estar acá con nosotros. Que tengan un día maravilloso. Gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias. Gracias.